The conference room on the 32nd floor had been designed to impress people who didn't understand what happened inside it. Glass walls framed a panoramic view of Newark's industrial arteries, rail lines, highways, ports, all pulsing with the slow, mechanical rhythm of commerce. Inside, the room was cold in both temperature and intention. The long mat table reflected the overhead lights in a dull, sterile sheen. No fingerprints, no personality. Daniel Kessler noticed that first. They'd wiped the table down before he arrived. That detail told him more than the carefully neutral expressions on the faces across from him. He didn't sit right away. "You called this for 9, he said, checking his watch, though he already knew the time. "It's 9:02. A small flex, not defiance, calibration. Across from him, Marissa Trent, CFO of Apex Logistics, didn't react. She folded her hands over a leather portfolio. "We wanted to ensure everyone was present before beginning," she said. Daniel glanced around the room. HR, legal, operations, no one from engineering. That confirmed it. He pulled out his chair slowly and sat. "Okay," he said. "Let's begin." There was a pause, deliberate, staged. Then Marissa leaned forward. "Apex is undergoing a strategic realignment," she began. "We're focusing on cost optimization across all departments." Daniel raised a hand. "No," he said calmly. "Don't do the script. Just say it." The HR director shifted slightly. Marissa's eyes narrowed a fraction. Not irritation, but recalibration again. "You are being terminated, effective immediately," she said. Silence. The word hung in the room like a dropped instrument. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Reason?" "Redundancy," said Marissa. "We've assessed that your role, while valuable historically, is no longer aligned with our current operational model." Daniel let out a small breath through his nose, not quite a laugh. "Redundant," he repeated. "Yes?" "Right." He looked past them through the glass wall at the traffic below, hundreds of vehicles moving in patterns invisible to the untrained eye, patterns he used to see instantly. "Who's taking over routing?" he asked. The VP of Operations, a broad-shouldered man named Ellis Grant, cleared his throat. "We're transitioning to a hybrid system," Ellis said. "Vendor-supported optimization tools combined with internal oversight." Daniel turned his head slowly. "Vendor-supported," he said. "Which vendor?" Ellis hesitated. "A mistake." Marissa answered instead. "We've onboarded Pathflow Solutions." Daniel blinked once, then again, and then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. "That's a mapping API with heuristic overlays," he said. "It's not optimization, it's suggestion." "It's industry standard," Ellis snapped, defensive now. "No," Daniel said softly. "It's industry average." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "And you think it replaces me?" Marissa didn't flinch. "We think it replaces your function." Daniel's gaze moved between them. Function. Not role, not contribution. Function. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Then I assume you've already migrated everything." "We've transitioned the system architecture," Ellis said. "Yes." Daniel tilted his head. "Everything?" "Yes." A longer pause this time. Daniel's fingers tapped lightly against the table. Once, twice, 3 times. "Did you deactivate the adaptive layer?" Blank looks. Marissa frowned slightly. "Clarify." Daniel's smile widened just a fraction. "The adaptive layer," he said. "The part that actually makes the routing efficient." Ellis shifted in his seat. "We've replicated all necessary logic." "No," Daniel said. "You haven't." Marissa's tone sharpened. "Daniel, if there's a point—" "There is," he said. "A very important one." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin folder. Not a laptop, not a drive. Paper. He slid it across the table. Marissa opened it carefully. Inside was a single document, a licensing agreement. She scanned the first few lines, then stopped. Her eyes moved back to the top, then down again. Daniel watched her face as understanding crept in, not all at once, but in stages. Recognition, calculation, concern. "What is this?" Ellis asked. Marissa didn't answer immediately. Daniel did. That, he said, is the license for the optimization engine you've been using for the past 6 years. Ellis frowned. We own that system. Daniel shook his head. No, he said, you don't. He leaned back again, folding his hands. You own the interface, the dashboards, the reports, but the core algorithm, the thing that actually computes efficient routes, that's mine. Silence returned, heavier this time. That's not possible, Ellis said. It is, Daniel replied. Check clause 4.2. Marissa flipped the page, her lips tightened. It's a personal license, she said quietly. Correct. For internal use by Apex Logistics. Correct. Non-transferable, she continued. Daniel nodded. And revocable upon termination of employment, she finished. There it was. The room shifted. Not physically, but perceptually, like a building settling after a structural crack. Ellis leaned forward. You're saying, what? That the system stops working? Daniel shrugged slightly. It depends how you define working, he said. It will still generate routes, Marissa said, thinking aloud. Yes. But without the optimization layer, it becomes very inefficient. Ellis stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We've been running simulations for weeks. Simulations using cached parameters, Daniel said. Static models, not live adaptation. Ellis opened his mouth, then closed it. Daniel continued, voice calm, almost conversational. My algorithm adjusts in real time, he said. Traffic patterns, fuel consumption curves, delivery windows, vehicle load distribution. It recalculates continuously. He tapped the folder lightly. You're about to lose all of that. Marissa closed the folder slowly. Daniel, she said, are you suggesting that the company's operational efficiency is dependent on your personal intellectual property? Daniel met her gaze. I'm not suggesting it, he said. I'm informing you. The air felt thinner now. Legal spoke up for the first time. We'll need to review this agreement. Of course, Daniel said. Ellis paced behind his chair. We can rebuild it. Daniel looked at him. Eventually, he said. Maybe. He paused. But not before your fuel costs spike, not before your delivery times slip, not before your clients notice. He stood up. No one stopped him. This isn't personal, Marissa said, almost reflexively. Daniel picked up his bag. It never is, he replied. He walked to the door, then paused. One more thing, he said, turning back slightly. You fired me to save money. A small beat. Let's see how much that cost you. He left the room without waiting for a response. Behind him, the city kept moving. Trucks merging, routes forming, decisions being made. But for Apex Logistics, the geometry of that movement had just begun to unravel. The first anomaly appeared so small that no one took ownership of it. A late delivery in Edison, 27 minutes behind schedule. The client, a mid-tier pharmaceutical distributor, filed a routine complaint, tagged it as non-critical, and moved on. At Apex Logistics, the alert appeared as a soft amber notification on a dashboard few people actively watched anymore. Probably traffic, someone in operations muttered, and that was the end of it, until it wasn't. 3 days later, Ellis Grant stood in front of the same dashboard, jaw tight, fingers braced against the edge of the console. How many? He asked. The analyst beside him swallowed. 42 late deliveries across the Northeast region. Average delay, 41 minutes. Ellis exhaled slowly. That's not a spike, he said. That's a pattern. The analyst nodded. We're seeing clustering along high-density routes. Define clustering. Routes that normally optimize around shared corridors aren't aligning correctly. Ellis turned. That's not English. The analyst hesitated, then tried again. The trucks aren't grouping efficiently. They're overlapping, doubling back, taking suboptimal paths. Ellis stared at the screen. On it, a map pulsed with colored lines, routes in motion. But something was off. Where there should have been clean, converging paths, there was chaos. Lines tangled over one another, like threads pulled too tight. Pathflow said their system adapts, Ellis said. It does, the analyst replied carefully, but not like before. Ellis's jaw tightened further. Before. No one said Daniel's name, but it was there, hanging between them. On the 32nd floor, Marissa Trent sat in her office, reviewing a report she'd already read twice. Fuel costs, up 8.3% week over week. That alone wasn't catastrophic, but the trend line, steep, unbroken, was. She tapped her pen against the desk, eyes scanning the projections. If this continues, she murmured. A knock at the door interrupted her. Come in. Legal stepped inside, Jonathan Pierce, calm as always, carrying a tablet instead of paper. I've reviewed the licensing agreement, he said. Marissa didn't look up. And? It's valid. She closed her eyes briefly. Completely? Yes. No leverage? Jonathan hesitated, then shook his head. It's tightly written. Ownership is clearly retained by Kessler. The revocation clause is enforceable. Marissa leaned back in her chair. So we're exposed. Yes. How exposed? Jonathan exhaled. If his algorithm is as integral as he claims, significantly. Marissa stood and walked to the window. Below, trucks moved in slow, steady lines along the highway, or at least they used to look steady. Now, all she could see was inefficiency, fuel burning unnecessarily, time slipping away. Can we negotiate? She asked. We can try. But he has no incentive to be reasonable. Marissa turned. Everyone has an incentive, she said. Jonathan didn't respond, because they both knew. Sometimes the incentive wasn't money. Daniel Kessler didn't check the news. He didn't need to. He had better data. In his apartment, a minimalist space overlooking the Hudson, 3 monitors glowed softly in the dim light. Streams of information scrolled across them, pulled from public logistics feeds, traffic APIs, and a handful of proprietary sources he'd built over the years. Apex's network was still visible. Not internally, not anymore. But externally, patterns always left fingerprints. Daniel sipped his coffee as he watched the lines. Messy, inefficient, predictable in all the wrong ways. They didn't disable fallback routing, he muttered. Of course they hadn't. They didn't know it existed. His fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up comparative models. Baseline efficiency versus current state. The difference was already measurable, not catastrophic yet, but trending, always trending. He leaned back in his chair, studying the numbers. They'll feel it in fuel first, he said quietly, then in time windows, then in contracts. He wasn't smiling. Not really. There was no satisfaction in this. Just inevitability. At Apex, inevitability arrived faster than anyone expected. By the end of the second week, fuel costs had climbed 14%. Dispatchers began overriding system-generated routes manually. That made things worse. Stop doing that, Ellis snapped during a tense operations meeting. We're trying to fix delays, one dispatcher shot back. You're compounding them. The system is broken. It's not broken, Ellis said. It's recalibrating. Even as he said it, he didn't believe it. The room fell into a strained silence. Finally, someone said what everyone was thinking. We need Daniel. Ellis's expression hardened. No, he said. We need a solution. The solution, as it turned out, was expensive. Pathflow Solutions sent a team on site, 3 engineers and a client strategist with a reassuring smile and a vocabulary full of non-answers. We're seeing some integration friction, the strategist explained in a conference room that felt colder than usual. What kind of friction? Marissa asked. Your previous system had custom layers. Ellis leaned forward. We told you that. Yes, the strategist said smoothly, but the extent of those customizations wasn't fully documented. Marissa's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Meaning your prior optimization logic isn't something we can replicate quickly. How long? Ellis demanded. The strategist paused. Months, she said. The word landed like a dropped weight. Months? Ellis repeated. To fully rebuild equivalent functionality, yes. Marissa's voice was quieter, more dangerous. And in the meantime, you may experience reduced efficiency. Reduced, Ellis echoed. The strategist didn't respond. She didn't need to. Competitors noticed before clients did. They always did. At Titan Freight Systems, a rival firm headquartered across the river, a senior analyst named Priya Desai stared at a report with growing interest. Apex is slipping, she said. Her manager looked up. Define slipping. Route inefficiency up, delivery delays increasing, fuel costs rising. It's subtle, but it's there. Cause? Priya shrugged. Unknown, but it's systemic. The manager leaned back, thinking. How fast can we capitalize? Priya's eyes sharpened. Very, she said. Back at Apex, the fractures widened. A major retail client escalated a complaint. Missed delivery windows across multiple locations. Penalties triggered. Revenue hit. Marissa stood in another meeting, this one larger, louder, more chaotic. This is not sustainable, someone said. No, it's not, she replied. What's the plan? That was the question, the only question. And for the first time since Daniel had walked out, Marissa didn't have an immediate answer. She thought of the folder, the license, the quiet certainty in his voice. You fired me to save money. Let's see how much that cost you. She inhaled slowly. We reach out to him, she said. Ellis looked up sharply. We are, Marissa interrupted, because right now he's not the problem. A pause. He's the solution. That evening, Daniel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it for a moment before answering. Daniel Kessler. A brief silence. Then, this is Marissa Trent. Of course it was. Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting to the screen where Apex's routes continued their slow unraveling. Yes, he said. We need to talk. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch. Not out of spite, out of precision. Finally, he spoke. I assumed you might. Daniel chose the restaurant deliberately, not upscale enough to feel like negotiation theater, not casual enough to suggest familiarity. A quiet place in Jersey City where the lighting was low, the acoustics controlled, and conversations stayed contained within their tables. Control mattered. He arrived early, not to wait, but to observe. From his seat near the back, he had a clear line of sight to the entrance, the bar, and the windows facing the street. People moved in predictable patterns, servers looping between tables, couples leaning in toward each other. A man at the bar checking his phone every 30 seconds. Everything followed a system, even when people thought it didn't. Daniel sipped his water and glanced at his watch. 7:03. Marissa Trent walked in at 7:04. Punctual, but not eager. Good. She spotted him immediately and approached without hesitation, posture straight, expression neutral. No wasted motion. You picked this place, she said as she sat down. Not a question. I did. Why? Because it's quiet, Daniel replied, and because you'll be less inclined to perform. Marissa's lips tightened slightly. I don't perform. Daniel tilted his head. Everyone performs, he said. The question is for whom? A server appeared. Drinks were ordered. Water for Daniel, a glass of white wine for Marissa. Then the server left, and the space between them settled into something sharper. Let's not waste time, Marissa said. You know why I'm here. Yes. And? Daniel leaned back. And you're not wrong to be concerned. Marissa held his gaze. Fuel costs are up 17%, she said. Delivery delays are compounding. We've had 2 major clients escalate in the past 48 hours. Daniel nodded once. I expected something like that. Of course you did. There was no accusation in her voice, just acknowledgement. Daniel folded his hands on the table. Your system is still generating routes, he said. But without adaptive optimization, it's making locally efficient decisions that are globally inefficient. Marissa exhaled slowly. Explain that in terms that matter. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Your trucks are making good short-term choices, he said, but bad long-term ones. They're avoiding immediate congestion, but creating downstream conflicts. They're prioritizing individual delivery windows instead of network flow. A pause. They're thinking like amateurs. Marissa didn't react outwardly, but something shifted behind her eyes. "And your algorithm?" she asked. "Thinks like a system," Daniel said. The server returned briefly, placing the wine on the table. Neither of them touched their drinks. When the server left, Marissa spoke again. "We need that system back." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He let the statement sit between them. Need, not want, not prefer, need. "Do you?" he asked finally. Marissa's expression hardened just slightly. "This isn't a game." "I'm not playing one." "Then stop pretending you don't understand the stakes." Daniel met her gaze, unflinching. "I understand them perfectly," he said. "The question is whether you do." A beat. Marissa leaned forward. "Spell it out." Daniel nodded. "Right now, you're losing money," he said. "But that's not the real problem. The real problem is trust." Marissa didn't interrupt. "Your clients chose Apex because you were more efficient than your competitors," Daniel continued. "You delivered faster, cheaper, more reliably. That wasn't luck. That was the algorithm." He paused. "Now that advantage is gone." Marissa's fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her glass. "Clients will tolerate a delay or two," Daniel said. "But patterns? Patterns change behavior." "And competitors are already moving," Marissa said. "Yes?" She studied him. "You've been watching." "Of course." "Why?" Daniel considered the question, then answered honestly. "Because I built it," he said. "And I wanted to see what happened without it." Marissa's gaze sharpened. "And?" Daniel leaned back again. "It's unfolding exactly as expected." Across the river at Titan Freight Systems, Priya Desai stood in a glass-walled conference room, presenting to a small group of executives. "Apex's inefficiencies are no longer marginal," she said, gesturing to a projected graph. "They're accelerating." The CEO, a sharp-featured man named Victor Lang, nodded slowly. "Opportunities?" he asked. Priya clicked to the next slide. "High-value clients with tight delivery windows," she said. "Retail chains, pharmaceuticals, perishable goods. How quickly can we move?" Priya didn't hesitate. "We're already drafting proposals." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Good," he said. "I want their clients before Apex realizes how exposed they are." Priya nodded. "They're realizing," she said quietly. Victor smiled faintly. "Then we're right on time." Back in the restaurant, Marissa set her glass down, untouched. "Let's talk terms," she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Straight to it?" "We don't have the luxury of subtlety." Daniel nodded once. "Fair." Marissa reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Not paper this time, but a tablet. "We're prepared to negotiate a new licensing agreement," she said. "Short-term reinstatement of your algorithm, with compensation adjusted to reflect its value." Daniel watched her carefully. "Short-term," he repeated. "Yes?" "So you can rebuild internally and remove dependency." Marissa didn't deny it. "That's the goal." Daniel smiled slightly. "I appreciate the honesty." "Don't mistake it for weakness." "I'm not." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "But you're still thinking too small." Marissa's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Daniel's voice was calm, measured. "You're treating this like a temporary disruption," he said. "Something to patch until you regain control." "That's exactly what it is." "No," Daniel said. "It's not." A pause. "This is structural," he continued. "Your entire competitive advantage was built on a system you didn't own." Marissa's jaw tightened. "We own the outcomes." "No," Daniel said softly. "You borrowed them." Silence. The words landed harder than anything else he'd said. Marissa leaned back, studying him. "So what are you proposing?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window for a moment, watching the reflection of traffic lights shifting across the glass. Then he turned back. "A partnership," he said. Marissa's expression didn't change. "Define partnership." "Not a license," Daniel said. "Equity." That got a reaction. Small, but real. "In Apex?" she asked. No. Another pause. In something new. Marissa stared at him. For the first time that evening, she looked genuinely surprised. You want to build a competitor, she said. I want to build a system, Daniel replied. The company is just the vehicle. And you expect Apex to help you do that? I expect Apex to recognize reality. Marissa's voice cooled. Which is? That you can't replicate what I built, not quickly, and not without me. And your solution is that we fund your exit? Daniel shook his head. My solution is that we evolve, he said. Together. Marissa let out a short breath. That's not going to happen. Then you'll keep losing ground. A long silence followed. Around them, the restaurant continued its quiet rhythm. Glasses clinked. Conversations murmured. Life moved. But at their table, everything had narrowed to a single axis. Control. Marissa finally spoke. You're asking us to bet the company on you, she said. Daniel met her gaze. You already did, he said. You just didn't realize it. That night, after the meeting ended without agreement, Marissa sat alone in her office, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. Her tablet glowed in front of her, displaying updated metrics. Fuel costs up 21%. Delays increasing. Client complaints rising. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, and made a decision. Across the river, Daniel sat in front of his monitors again. A new data stream had appeared. Not public, not accidental. He smiled slightly. They're escalating, he said. On the screen, Apex's network pulsed. More chaotic now, more fragmented. And beneath it, another model began to form. Cleaner, more efficient, not yet real, but soon. The first contract loss hit like a contained explosion. Not loud, not dramatic, but devastating in its precision. At 8:12 a.m. on a gray Tuesday, Marissa Trent received the email. Subject line, Service Reevaluation Notice. She didn't need to open it to know what it was, but she did anyway. Due to ongoing delivery inconsistencies and failure to meet contractual time windows, we are exercising our right to terminate the agreement effective immediately. She read it twice, then a third time. Not because she needed to understand it, but because repetition made it real. Apex Logistics had just lost one of its largest retail clients. Annual value, $48 million. Marissa leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. There was no anger, not yet, just clarity. A line had been crossed. Downstairs, the operations floor no longer resembled the controlled environment it had once been. It sounded different. Phones rang longer, voices overlapped, screens flickered with alerts that no one could clear fast enough. Ellis Grant stood in the middle of it, trying to impose order on something that no longer responded to it. Stop rerouting manually, he barked. A dispatcher turned toward him, eyes sharp with exhaustion. Then fix the system. We are fixing it. No, you're not, she snapped. We're reacting. That's all we're doing. Ellis clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue. He wanted to assert control. But somewhere beneath the frustration, he knew she was right. They weren't managing the system anymore. They were chasing it and losing. In a conference room upstairs, the PathFlow team looked different than they had 2 weeks ago. Less confident, more cautious. Their strategist, the same one who had spoken in smooth reassurances, now chose her words carefully. We've implemented several optimization patches, she said. Marissa didn't sit this time. She stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly against the surface. And? She asked. We've seen marginal improvements. How marginal? A pause. 3% reduction in inefficiency. Marissa didn't react. 3%, she repeated. Yes. Our fuel costs are up 24%. The strategist nodded. We're aware. And your solution is 3%. It's iterative, the strategist said. We're building toward... Toward what? Marissa interrupted. The room went quiet. The strategist didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't a good answer. Across the river, Titan freight systems moved quickly. Too quickly to be coincidence. Priya Desai stood once again in front of Victor Lang, but this time the tone of the meeting was different. Less analytical, more decisive. They've lost their retail contract, Priya said. Victor's eyebrows lifted slightly. Confirmed? Yes? He leaned back, fingers steepled. And pharmaceuticals? Still holding, for now. Victor nodded. Then that's next. Priya hesitated. There's something else, she said. Victor gestured for her to continue. We've identified the source of their disruption. Victor's eyes sharpened. Go on. Priya tapped her tablet, pulling up a document. A proprietary optimization algorithm, she said. Privately licensed. Owned by a former employee. Victor smiled faintly. So they cut the brain out of their own system. Yes? And now they're bleeding. Priya nodded. Victor stood. Find him, he said. Priya blinked. The engineer? Yes. What for? Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Because if he built that system once, he can build it again. Daniel Kessler didn't answer unknown numbers anymore, but when the call came from a blocked corporate line, he let it ring twice before picking up. Daniel. Mr. Kessler, a voice said, smooth, controlled, unfamiliar. This is Victor Lang. Daniel leaned back slightly. He knew the name. Titan Freight, he said. Correct. A brief silence. I assume this isn't a social call. Victor chuckled softly. No, he said. It's an opportunity. Daniel's eyes flicked to his screens, where Apex's system continued its slow disintegration. I'm listening. At Apex, the board meeting was already underway when Marissa walked in. No one greeted her. No one needed to. The atmosphere said everything. This wasn't a discussion. It was an autopsy in progress. Fuel variance is unsustainable, one board member was saying. We're burning capital at an accelerating rate. We're addressing it, Marissa said as she took her seat. How? Another voice asked. Pathflow is not solving this, the first board member cut in. A murmur of agreement followed. Marissa didn't flinch. We're pursuing multiple avenues. Such as? She paused, just long enough for the room to notice. Negotiation, she said. With Kessler, someone said. Yes. A silence settled over the table, heavy, evaluative. Is that viable? The chairman asked. Marissa met his gaze. It's necessary. Not the same thing. No, she agreed. It's not. The chairman leaned forward. Then let's be clear, he said. If he's the only solution, we need him back, whatever that costs. Marissa's expression remained neutral. And if he refuses? The chairman didn't hesitate. Then we find a way to make him reconsider. That night, Daniel sat in his apartment, the city lights reflecting across his monitors. On one screen, Apex's network. On another, a developing model, cleaner, more efficient, still incomplete. And on the third, a contract proposal from Titan Freight Systems. He hadn't opened it yet. He didn't need to. He already knew what it would say. Money, resources, freedom to build, everything Apex had refused to offer. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't unknown. It was Marissa. Daniel stared at the screen for a moment, then answered, Yes. We need to meet, she said. No, Daniel replied calmly. You need to decide. A pause. Things have escalated, she said. I know. We've lost a major client. I know that too. Another pause, longer this time. Then Marissa said something she hadn't said before. What do you want? Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting to the city beyond the glass. What did he want? Control? Recognition? Vindication? None of those felt quite right. I want to build something that works, he said finally. You already did. No, Daniel said. I built something that you used. Marissa closed her eyes briefly on the other end of the line. And now? Now I build something I own. Silence. Then, Titan called you, didn't they? Daniel smiled faintly. Yes. And? I haven't answered yet. Marissa's voice tightened. Don't. Why? Because if you do, she said, you're not just leaving Apex behind. Daniel didn't respond. You're destroying it. A beat. Daniel's voice, when it came, was quieter. Apex made that decision, he said. Not me. The next morning, everything accelerated. A second major client issued a formal warning. Fuel costs crossed 26%. Internal projections began using a word no one had spoken aloud yet: unsustainable. At 10:17 a.m., Marissa walked into Ellis's office. "We're out of time," she said. Ellis didn't argue. "What's the move?" Marissa placed a folder on his desk. Inside, Daniel's original licensing agreement and a blank addendum. "We give him what he wants," she said. Ellis looked up. "Everything?" Marissa met his gaze. "If we don't," she said, "there won't be anything left to save." Across the river, Daniel opened the Titan contract. He read it once, slowly, then again, more carefully. It was everything he expected, and more. He closed the document, looked at his other screen, at Apex, at the chaos, at the system unraveling in real time. Then he made a call, not to Titan, to Marissa. The final meeting didn't happen in a conference room. Marissa made sure of that. No glass walls, no observers, no performance, just a private office on a high floor, stripped of anything unnecessary, no assistants, no legal teams, no interruptions. The blinds were half drawn, muting the late afternoon light into something softer, less corporate. Daniel noticed immediately. "Different setting," he said as he stepped inside. Marissa closed the door behind him. "Different conversation." He nodded once. That was fair. For a moment, neither of them sat. The space between them wasn't hostile anymore, but it wasn't neutral either. It was precise, measured. Like two people standing on opposite ends of a narrow bridge, both aware that only one direction mattered now. Marissa gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "Sit." Daniel did. No hesitation, no ceremony. She didn't open with numbers, didn't reference losses or clients or projections. That phase was over. "I was wrong," she said. Daniel didn't react immediately. Not because he was surprised, but because he understood the weight of it. In Apex, those words didn't exist lightly. He leaned back slightly. "In what way?" he asked. Marissa met his gaze. "I treated your system as a tool," she said. "Something replaceable, scalable, transferable." A pause. "It isn't." Daniel tilted his head. "No," he said. "It isn't." Marissa nodded once. "And I treated you the same way." That hung longer. He didn't interrupt. "I optimized for cost," she continued. "Short-term efficiency, predictable savings." She let out a quiet breath. "And I ignored dependency." Daniel watched her carefully. "You didn't ignore it," he said. "You misunderstood it." Marissa considered that, then nodded. "Yes," she said. "That's more accurate." Outside the office, Apex Logistics was still unraveling. Not collapsing, not yet, but the structure was strained in ways that were becoming visible even to those who didn't understand the mechanics. Dispatchers had stopped trusting the system. Drivers were improvising routes. Clients were asking questions no one could answer cleanly. And competitors were no longer circling. They were taking. Back inside, Marissa slid a document across the desk. Paper again. Deliberate. Daniel didn't touch it right away. "What is it?" he asked. "Everything you asked for," she said. That got his attention. He picked it up slowly, read the first page, then the second. His expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted. "This isn't a license," he said. "No, it's equity." "Yes." "In a new entity." "Yes." Daniel looked up. "You're serious." Marissa didn't blink. "I don't have the luxury of not being serious." The structure was clean, elegant even. A new company, separate from Apex, but backed by its capital and infrastructure. Daniel would own a controlling stake. His algorithm, no longer licensed, would be foundational intellectual property. Apex would receive exclusive operational access for a defined period. After that, the system would scale, beyond Apex, beyond anything it had been before. Daniel flipped another page. "You're giving up control," he said. Marissa shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "I'm redefining it." A small pause. "Control isn't ownership," she added. "It's alignment." Daniel leaned back, studying her. That was new. Not the words, but the understanding behind them. "You've changed your model," he said. "I've changed my assumptions." Across the river, Victor Lang stood in his office, staring out at the skyline. Priya Desai stood behind him, tablet in hand. "He hasn't responded," she said. Victor didn't turn. "He will," he said. "Are you sure?" Victor smiled faintly. "Everyone responds to leverage," he said. Priya hesitated. "What if we're not the only offer?" Victor's expression didn't change. "Then we become the best one." Back at Apex, Daniel set the document down. "There's a condition," he said. Marissa didn't react. "Of course there is." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "I don't rebuild the old system," he said. "I replace it." Marissa's eyes narrowed, just a fraction. "Meaning?" "Meaning Apex doesn't just recover," Daniel said. "It transforms." A pause. "This becomes the new standard." Marissa considered that. The risk, the scale, the uncertainty, everything she would have rejected 3 weeks ago. "What does that look like?" she asked. Daniel's voice was steady. "Full network visibility," he said. "Real-time adaptive routing across all nodes, predictive modeling instead of reactive optimization." He gestured lightly toward the window. "Not just trucks moving efficiently," he said. "An entire system that understands movement before it happens." Marissa listened, carefully. "This isn't just logistics," she said. "No," Daniel replied. "It's infrastructure." Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't tension. It was weight. Decision weight. Marissa walked to the window, looking out over the city. Traffic moved below, still chaotic, still inefficient. But now she saw it differently, not as noise, as data, untapped, uncontrolled. She turned back. "If we do this," she said, "there's no going back." Daniel nodded. "I know." "And if it fails?" "It won't." "That's not an answer." Daniel held her gaze. "It's the only one that matters." The decision wasn't made in that moment. It had been forming for days, weeks. The meeting just made it visible. Marissa returned to the desk, picked up a pen, and signed. 3 weeks later, Apex Logistics looked different. Not externally, not yet, but internally, everything had shifted. The old system was gone completely, not patched, not repaired, replaced. Daniel stood in a new operations room, one that hadn't existed before, larger, quieter, more focused. Screens displayed not routes but flows, not decisions but predictions. Ellis stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the system update in real time. "It's different," he said. Daniel nodded. "Yes, that's not what I meant." Daniel glanced at him. "I know." Ellis exhaled slowly. "For what it's worth," he said, "I was wrong about you." Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "You were right." Ellis frowned. "I fired you," he said. "And you needed to," Daniel replied. Ellis blinked. "That doesn't make sense." Daniel looked back at the screens. "It does," he said. "You just couldn't see the whole system yet." On one of the monitors, a route recalculated, not reactively, proactively, a delay predicted before it happened, a path adjusted before it mattered. Efficiency restored. No, redefined. Across the river, Titan Freight Systems reviewed their latest numbers. Apex wasn't losing clients anymore. They were stabilizing, then recovering, then something else. "What changed?" Victor asked. Priya studied the data, then looked up. "They didn't fix the system," she said. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Then what?" Priya hesitated. "They replaced it." Back in the operations room, Marissa stood behind Daniel, watching the system in motion. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then, "What do we call it?" Daniel didn't turn. He watched the patterns unfold. Clean, precise, controlled. Then he said, "We don't." Marissa raised an eyebrow. "No name?" Daniel shook his head. "Names make people think it's finished," he said. A small pause. "This isn't finished." Outside, the city kept moving. Trucks, routes, decisions. But beneath it all, something had changed. Not visible, not obvious, but real. The geometry of movement had shifted, and this time, it belonged to someone who understood its value. Value.